Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Spyderco Endela. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank my buddy Sid. He sent this guy along just as a donation to the channel. He's a good friend, and ended up with this guy and decided he didn't want to hold on to it. And thank you so much for that, Sid. You're a good friend and a big fan, or a big friend of the channel. Also a big fan, I imagine, but nonetheless, he's a great guy, so thank you for that. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. The Endela is, you might be thinking to yourself, Nick, that's just a Delica or an Endura or something in the middle. This is actually literally something in the middle, right? This is the knife that fills in the gap between the Spyderco Delica on this side and the Spyderco Endura, which I do not actually have one of because it is a little bit too damn big in my life, right? But what we see here is this is bigger than the Delica. We see that the Delica here measures just under 3 inches. This guy measures just under 3.5. So this is a bigger Delica. A lot of the same ideas are present here, a lot of the same, but it's just a bigger, thicker Delica. It's what it is. And in fact, if we do a size comparison against the Spyderco PM2, what we're going to realize is that this guy is basically PM2 size. The handle is about the size of the PM2. It's maybe slightly larger, or I'm sorry, slightly more compact, and it is very slightly thinner. But this is basically a PM2 sized Delica, right? If you've been liking this size range, you're really probably going to like the Endela rather than the Delica or the Endura. So there is that, and then here it is, of course, for tradition's sake, next to the Ontario Rat 2. What we're going to see here is this is bigger. So this is a relatively bigger knife than the Delica, but that's kind of its point, right? This is someplace between the Endura and the Delica, hence Endela. So there you go. Next thing, a couple of quick notes. This is a knife made by Spyderco, but it is made in its Seki City, Japan factory, as are most of the FRN Spydercos. So the lightweight Chaparral being the exception there. Well, actually, there are a couple of other ones. But still, this lineup here, the Endela, Endela, Delica, Endura, are all made in Seki City. And then this particular knife is in K390. There are sprints out there. God knows Spyderco does sprints these days. But this is an ongoing version in K390 steel. The other version is in VG10 steel. We'll talk more about that later on, but I would recommend the K390 if you were even contemplating the Delica, Endura, Endela at this point in time. That is the play. There is also a version of the Endela with a Warncliffe blade, as well as with a full serrated blade, as well as, they got some other versions out there, but nonetheless, that's where we're at here. So let's go on ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this interesting knife here. So the good side to start with is it retains, honestly, in a lot of ways, a lot of the good stuff from the Delica and from the Endura remain here, right? It is still a relatively lightweight knife. We're coming in here at 3.1 ounces for 3.5 inches of blade. That's not super heavy. The clip here is a 4-position clip, so you can get tip down or tip up, carry on the right side or left side of the knife, which is a beautiful thing. And as a result, because the opening hole is ambidextrous and the backlock is ambidextrous. This is a backlock knife. In order to unlock the knife, you press this little button down here, and it lets you close the knife. But because all of the elements are ambidextrous and the clip can be flipped, then this means it is a fully ambi knife. A lefty has exactly the same experience as a righty with this knife, and that's a beautiful thing. It has great ergonomics, frankly better than the Delica. This fits in the hand very well. The clip finds itself in a good position here. And by the way, one thing that's worth noting about the clip, note this little patch in the middle here. That's actually very smart. We've got strong texture everywhere else, but under the clip, this little smooth patch is there, so it's much easier to get into and out of your pocket. Those are the little kind of details that you've got to really appreciate, and nice to see them when they happen. But anyways, ergonomically speaking, the clip is great. It feels great in the hand, generally speaking. It feels better than the Delica, and I think there's going to be a whole class of people who find the Delica too small and find the Endura too big, and this is exactly in the middle there, and I think ergonomically that's true here too. Next thing, speaking of that texturing, holy texturing, Batman, this is textured. If we take a look here, what we see are individual little triangular prisms of some variety or another. I don't even freaking know how to call these things. But anyways, what this has is a bunch of different rows of almost little shark-toothy things that give you incredible grip in the hand. If you put this guy here, grip in the hand, it's supposed to grip between the toes, I suppose, although, actually, I imagine this would give good grip there, too. I haven't tried. Moving on. I feel like this is it's going to give you a bunch of gription here. Combined with the jimping along the back of the blade, the finger, this is not going anywhere in your hand. Even if you're in the Vaseline factory, this is going to stay right where you want it to, and that's just a beautiful thing. Next thing, this guy is very, very functionally minded. It cuts things very, very well, right? It has a very nice, relatively thin blade. The stock on the blade blade is a little bit thicker than on the Delica here, but it's not quite as thick as on, say, the PM2, so you end up with something that is very, very slicey. It stays in the hand. It's very secure. The lockup on it is a back lock, so it's a very, very secure, strong lockup here. And it is beefy enough, I think, for daily use, but without being ridiculously beefy. It's not overbuilt in any particular way, right? I really do like this line here, the Delica, Endela, Endura line, for just functional cutting tools. These are very, very easy to recommend in that way, and so I think this is a really, really nice piece for just a great cutting tool. And then finally, on the good side, the Endela size, I think, is nice. The Delica is my choice, but it's a little small for some. I have smaller hands than most and tend to prefer a blade around the 3-inch line. The Endura, on the other hand, has a feeling of really to it that is kind of, yeah, it's a little bit much, right? This is sort of the extra medium version that I don't think we knew we needed. If you like the PM2 size, this is exactly that, and we all know that a lot of folks like the PM2. And so if you've been looking at the Endela, I'm sorry, the Delica or the Endura, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I want something in the middle, they've delivered that. It's a long time in coming. Frankly, it's really nice to see it, but I'm actually surprised at how much I like this size here, right? It's a very nice little detail here, and I think it really does bridge that gap well. I'm probably going to stop at recommending the Endura, generally speaking, and send people who want something a little bigger towards this guy. So, to me, all of that is the good, is that the Endela size is nice. It's very functional as a knife. The texturing makes it great in slippery conditions. The ergos are great. It's fully ambidextrous with a 4-position clip, and it is relatively light. On the great side, this has a great blade. This line is Spyderco's, and Spyderco, generally speaking, does a pretty good job of making thin stock thin behind the edge, and thus making great cutting tools. But particularly, K390 is a steel I really like, because it's just good, right? It holds an edge very well, and it takes an edge very well, and stropping it up, it gets ridiculously sharp. And with this 3.5-inch blade, with this nice thin, oh man, this is just nice for cutting. On days where I had this in the pocket, I was absolutely set with regards to cutting tools, and that was a beautiful thing. If every knife had a blade like this, the market would be strictly better. This is just a really nice blend of basically thin edge, thin stock, and great steel in the K390 version here that I just gotta love. So to me, what's great here is the blade. I was pretty careful to mention K390 steel, and that brings us to the bad. The base steel for this model is VG10. And VG10 is a steel that is fine, but it is past its prime, so to speak. It has a role for people who really appreciate good ease of sharpening. VG10 is a steel that is very easy to sharpen on anything. On the back of a ceramic mug, the top of your freaking car window, you can sharpen VG10 on pretty much anything. And more specifically, you gotta really love doing sharpening, because you're gonna be sharpening a lot with VG10. It is also substantially more stainless than K390, so do keep that in mind as a downside of this particular thing. But every time I've carried VG10 in a world of super steels, my main thought is just like, wait, you're dulling already? Really? It's just pretty heavily outclassed these days. In 2022, VG10 is a steel that had kind of better be cheap. And the base model isn't cheap enough to do it. So if you like this design, and a little bit of rust resistance isn't a deal breaker, a little bit less rust resistance isn't a deal breaker, I would go K390. I would spend that extra money. It is worth that upgrade, I think, for a lot of people, particularly if ease of sharpening isn't the most important thing in your life. Next up, unfortunately, this line here, and I'm talking about the Endela here, but I'm also talking about the Delica and the Endura. This line is just not good value anymore. It used to be one of the places where you would go for great value. The Delica was always my value pick for things, but unfortunately, this line is one of the places where Spyderco's repeated price hikes have been really, really bad, right? This is $140 in K390, and it is $92 in VG10. And you know what? They're now in this kind of awkward space where they feel in a lot of ways like budget-focused knives, with what is predominantly a polymer handle here. But they are priced like premium, and with certainly the VG10, a very budgety steel, but they are priced like premium pocket knives. And in order to get reasonable steel, you're way north of $100. They're just not competing super well at these prices. They are still great tools functionally speaking, but just a lot of folks are doing better for less. And particularly when Seki City as a factory is, Well, they've been having some, it's not their best factory. We'll just put it this way. It's just the price hikes have been brutal to this lineup. And unfortunately, although these are great knives, they don't feel like great value. And so that to me is a problem. Next thing, they're not particularly hard use friendly knives either. If you are a person who's going to be out in the outback, high speed, low drag, pound your, knife into a tree and use it as a ladder step, that kind of stuff, this ain't it, right? Because the tip is a little bit more on the fine side. The blade itself is thin. For 99% of everyday carry use, this is going to be just fine. But if you are really being abusive to your tools, you might consider a slightly different construction, right? Next thing, there are some hot spots still on the inside of the FRN. This is something you can reduce yourself a little bit. Do not sand fiberglass without adequate respiratory protection, but at the same time, there are definitely little bits of hot spotting as you grip this guy along the inside of the not the end of the world, but it is a thing. Next thing, backlocks are great in a lot of ways, but they do require a little bit of learning to get to use one-handed, right? You can absolutely do it, and after you've done it for a while, it's fine, and especially with this unsharpened ricasso down here, this is that's exactly why that's there, and so it's easy enough to do one-handed, but you need to learn the trick. Next thing. The clip here is painted. Nothing else on the knife is black, and I don't know why they keep making the clips black. The very first thing I do when I get a new Spyderco in this lineup here is I take the clip downstairs and I sand the heck out of it, and I get rid of all the black shit on there, and that is absolutely fine. But at the same time, it is still very, very much a black clip on a knife where nothing else is, and that's going to show wear. It's not necessarily something I love. It's just not super attractive. It's also, by the way, a very shallow carry. This can be great in that it's easy to get out of the pocket here, but if you're looking for something more subtle, a deep carry clip, an aftermarket deep carry clip, might be something you should consider on this guy. Then finally, speaking of Seki City not being their greatest factory, centering on this guy is not good, right? That's unimpressive. That is fundamentally unimpressive. And each time the price goes up, that kind of thing feels less and less okay. If I'd paid $90 for this in K390, okay, maybe, but at $140, absolutely not. So this came way, way off center, and every time I've tried to adjust it in some way, it just goes drifting back. So unfortunately, that was not a great thing. So to me, all of that is the bad, is that Seki is... Well, they're doing that a fair amount lately. It's still got painted clips. It's you're going to need to do a little learning to get good at one-handed backlock. There's some hot spots inside the FRN. It's not an oh my god hard use knife. They have price hiked this way out of value territory. And VG10 is a base steel. Not feeling it at $90. No. On the ugly front, unfortunately, this still has the same construction issue of the Delica and the Endura, in that as you are putting this guy together, there is a little plastic post in there that is supporting a spring. You can maintain it with that, given you watch my disassembly. I show you the method to do it. It's not great, though. You end up with a markedly worse disassembly experience for this line of knives than otherwise, and I'd kind of hope that as they did a new design in this, that they might have rectified that. Put a metal post in there, done something a little bit differently. But that complexity, that extra added pain in the neck for disassembly is, to me, a design flaw, and it's still something that I dislike about this entire lineup of knives. So, to me, the ugly is that design flaw for disassembly does remain in the knife. On the final conclusion front, this is a good knife, right? I mean, it's got relatively light construction. It's a 4-position clip, fully ambi, great texturing, great ergos, good function, a nice size, and with the K390 version, a really awesome cutting tool blade. To be fair, VG10 ain't impressing anybody at $90. The value has pretty much been price hiked out of the lineup at this point. This is a knife that is meant for slicing and cutting, not for beating on. There is a bit of a hot spot on the inside there. It's not super flicky, one-hand friendly. The clip is still painted, the centering is way off, and the design makes this assembly a little harder than it needs to be. In practice, I have loved this series of knives, right? My love for the Spyderco Delica is not exactly hidden. There's a reason it is one of my size comparison knives. It remains an incredible freaking piece, right? It's just so damn good. And the Endura is way too big for me, but it is also a very impressive knife. And it turns out that when you make one that is right in the middle, that is a little bigger than the Delica and a little smaller than the Endura, it's also a pretty nice knife, right? It's a very, very solid tool. And it offers an alternative to the PM2 with thinner stock and different steels and, a slightly reduced price relative to the PM2. And so that can be very, very nice. And historically, everything in this lineup have been gems, right? And this is tricky. You might be thinking, oh, well, if this was a gem, then this is a gem. Well, yeah, that's true. And it feels like a no-duh moment. But then there are the price hikes, right? The VG10 versions, unfortunately, have priced themselves out of gem status a while back. In 2022, VG10 is a fine budget steel, but $90 is not a fine budget price. I'm sorry, no, I don't see it anymore. The K390 versions are really nice pocket knives, functionally speaking. I love that this is a regular production sort of thing. This should be just the Delica at this point. This should just be the Endura at this point. If they're going there, or, go to, I don't know, Magna Cut or something. This should be the base model here. But I like the steel a lot, and paired with a really nice design like these guys have, absolutely, it's great. I love my Delica in K390. It's one of my favorite knives. Really, really good. I think the Endela is going to be really, really good for you too. But the thing is, at $125 for the Delica in K390 and $140 for the Endela and Endura, competition's getting really strong, and as these prices go up, little fit and finish issues like this, like this right here, whoops, are not good, right? That's really hard to ignore. At that kind of a price point, any quality control fail is not okay, right? That's something you can tolerate for the budget, but not at $140. So I really hope that Spyderco realizes that their FRN line is a lot like a dude with a broken leg. They just can't take any more hiking. Stop! It's a problem. So even though I love the design, many, many years of price gains have taken the K390 FRN Spyderco line out of like, duh, it's a gem territory and into the borderlands, right? And I kind of have to do one of those conditional things. Like if the extra $40 just doesn't bother you because of the nature of your budget or your view of the world, or if you really want lighter weights and slicey blades, then by God, you can get one of these, and it's going to be a great tool for you. It is a great knife, and it'll be a gem for you. But if value and bang for your buck is a relevant factor here, I gotta say, there are a lot of good options, and every time they raise that price, there just become more and more good options out there. So the K390 Endela is a really great knife. It's at an interesting size and at a price that's a little bit less great. And ultimately, only you are gonna end up knowing whether this guy should be indelibly added to your collection. Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.